welcome Brother Farooq to this edition of what we call wide-ranging interview. So it's going to be as wide-ranging as possible. And first of all, welcome to Sri Lanka. I understand this is not your first visit. I think you've been here before to Sri Lanka, and
it is actually my first visit.
Right.
To
okay.
Surprise you.
I would always assume that you were.
I'm wondering why have I not come earlier?
Yes, and that's the question we should
The
ask.
Hospitality and friendship that I've received here is quite touching and heartwarming, and also the activities I've seen here has also impressed me immensely.
So, Farooq, you and I have known each other for a long time. I think longer than I'd like to remember. I think you'd like to remember, yes. But I've always known you to be part of inspiring the young Muslims in the UK in particular, and helping them to identify their path in life and their spiritual path in life as well. How much of a challenge is it now, given the circumstances that we face with regards influences from ISIS and all? How much of a challenge is it now for young people, for young Muslims in the world that we face?
Yes, I think narrative has become more challenging, but also with that, opportunities have also increased. There's greater interest, for example, in understanding one's faith, the world where we live in, one's place in that world. So from that point of view, to attract young Muslims to a discussion and debate, to understand better, and to make a choice, to make a positive contribution with their life. That's why I say to young people, your time is limited. You can't live somebody else's life. Your time and place is now. Whatever the issues we have are not that unprecedented either, especially if you're coming from Muslim background, Islamic. If you read Islamic text, the history of this message of Islam, which is a message of peace, message of building ties and bring humanity together and closer, to enable humanity to live by justice, that has always been a challenging path for those who brought this message earlier. And therefore, in the Quran, for example, we find the stories of that struggle has been documented in great detail, which is recited beautifully. But actually the story is one of facing challenges, one of a struggle, one of overcoming human weaknesses and so on. So from that point of view, I think I do not find the situation to be that unprecedented that we should feel that we are now a bit lost and we don't know where to go. I think the path remains the same, and this matter of discovering the path of wisdom, the path that can be productive.
And in terms of young Muslims in the UK, what do you think are some of the key challenges they're facing, particularly to their context? Because one of the things that we see here in Sri Lanka, for example, is that young Muslims feel that the whole narrative of Islamophobia is affecting them. We hear stories in the UK, for example, that are twisted to suit certain audiences here, where, for example, we had a story here about the Sharia patrol that was there in the UK in one small part of East London, but it was twisted to make it a big thing here. How are people dealing with those type of issues, the issues of Islamophobia in the UK, so that maybe we can learn some lessons here in Sri Lanka?
Yes, it is very unfortunate that for young Muslims in UK to wake up every morning and to set their foot outside the door to go to work and to see that everyone has got a newspaper in their hand which has got a negative story about the faith about them, which they cannot in any way can relate to their faith in terms of their own values and their own passion, their own commitment to faith, and their understanding of that faith from the parents and in the community. So what happens is that certainly can detach you from the society and create a mistrust between people, and that is a quite divisive and dangerous narrative that we need to confront. How do we deal with the challenge? That is the issue now. So of course you can either withdraw, you can say, well, I'm packing my bags and I'll go and live somewhere else. You can respond in a reactive way, in an extremist way, possibly in a violent way to that whole narrative. But the part that I think what we have argued and we have campaigned for, to which we draw young Muslims, is one of creating awareness, understanding, answering the question. I think there's a lot of goodwill in British society, in the world as a whole, in every society. I'm sure that must be your experience in Sri Lankan society as well. That, you know, people don't buy always these headlines. People buy what they see, what they experience. And so we have an opportunity to actually show and draw people closer. And therefore, I think many campaigns we have done, we have been really encouraged by them. For example, Muslim Council of Britain, which plays an active role, the main umbrella organization of Muslim communities, encouraging our mosques that, you know, why don't you open your doors once a year? And we have this campaign called Visit My Mosque, which happened, was in the second year, and we had it in February. And even a place like where I work, the Islamic Foundation, which is in a cut-off, you know, as you know, in a serene rural area with hardly any communities or population around, we had many visitors coming from 30 miles, 40 miles, non-Muslims, families, elderly people, young people. And I asked them, what attracted you to come to on a Sunday afternoon when you could have done many other things, you know, apart from watching football to looking after the family and shopping. And they said, we saw the advertisement in the news, we heard BBC News, we read Guardian newspaper, and we saw that there is a Visit My Mosque campaign. So we checked on the internet, where's the nearest one I could go to. So I came along because I want to know better, I want to learn. That's a commitment I made, that, you know, one day I'll visit a mosque, which I never had the chance to visit in my whole life for 30, 40 years, and there have been 1,500 mosques. So we have to open our doors, we have to engage, we have to remove misconception, misunderstanding, we have to be proactive. And I think that will change people's perception, and as Quran itself says, remove evil with what is better. You will find that you and between whom there is enmity will become bosom and very close allies and friends. And what will make us friends is the fact that we have common aspirations, common interests, common objective. I think everybody wants peace, everybody wants justice, all faiths share in these common values. It is the political agenda around the world and political flashpoints and conflict zones which is driving some of these headlines.
And I think that's quite key in terms of making that open. And I think, you know, you mentioned the Muslim Council of Britain, you were past Secretary General of that. And how were you able to bring a consensus amongst the 500 or so organizations? How did you manage to hold that balance? Because it's often very difficult with different organizations, different agendas. How was it that you were able to kind of keep some sort of sense of unity there?
Yes. It is a path you have to tread carefully. Unity does not mean uniformity. That's the first principle that you need to teach and you need to learn and practice. Quite often we talk about unity, what we mean is everybody being the same. We are not the same. We have 1,400 years of very rich history of opinions on various issues, different ways of interpreting our historical events, as well as how we should be living our life today in terms of what Islam says in fiqh and issues of jurisprudence and so on. So what we do is we keep away from these two. The fiqh is not a point for discussion for us, nor is how we perceive an historical event which may have taken at the time of Khilafah and at the time of political turmoils in Muslim history. What we focus on is that, you know, we have a common kalima, we have a common book, we have common requirements and needs as a community, as a minority. We all do not like the media headlines, whether we are Shia, Sunni, belong to this organization or that organization. Even those who may not strictly see as within the fold of Islam, many of us, such as possibly Ismailis and others, they feel the same pressure of the Islamophobic narrative, or not having the rights in the schools to have equal rights as people belong to different faith. So we focus on these common elements, the least common denominator we find, and work on that. And that time and again we have seen Muslim countries where masses rally and come together on those issues. You know, after all, Muslims of India were more or less united when it came to the idea of a Muslim state such as Pakistan. There were differences. Many scholars did not agree with the idea, but some kind of consensus, or at least a unity around an idea, was created to make that idea practical and possible. I think this is the main strategic, if you want to create unity, is to do this, is to first accept that despite our differences, we are part of the same ummah. Historically, you'll find even one major schism today, which is between Shia and Sunni, which is, I think, quite precarious at the moment because of the Middle Eastern issue. But even there, we would find that historically, Sunni scholars have not declared Shia, those who are Shia, to be outside the fold of Islam, and vice versa. We all perform Hajj together. We are able to enter through miqat together, so we can enter many other alliances together, which is for the betterment of Muslim Ummah.
And currently, I mean, in the UK, parts of Europe as well, we're seeing an increasing wave of what you would call racist nationalism, I think is the most diplomatic way of putting it. We've seen elements of that here in Sri Lanka, but I think worldwide we're seeing this kind of rise of that. The US is also now, we're seeing a very virulent form of it. How is Muslim community reacting to this type of pressure, this added pressure now to this type of narrative that is coming up?
I think it's the other side of the same coin, basically. But it is, of course, further heightened by the waves of migrants who are arriving into Europe. And as you know, Britain has offered to exit from a referendum to the people to choose whether to stay in Europe or not on 23rd of June. European societies obviously have challenges, and immigration and migration has been an issue which has been discussed because of it is demographic change. It has its impact on culture. But what we argue is that it should be conducted in an objective manner and in a dispassionate manner, in the sense that we need to have the just and fair view. The fair view is that immigrants have driven the prosperity that we see in European societies after the Second World War. It was the coming of immigrants that drove the economic engine of European society. And they have, time and again, statistics have come and showed that they make a positive net contribution to the society. European population isn't getting any younger. Demographically, they face a challenge, and it's been recognized by the main governments, including Germany, that their birth rate is not healthy to keep them as rich as they are. And immigration is one solution, but that has to be managed. And we need to manage it through respect for human beings and recognition of our rights as human beings in a society, and achieving equality for all those who contribute to that society. If that is the agenda, I'm sure we can find solutions, and that's where we should be contributing and not fall into a kind of divisive, racist slogans and politics.
You've had many hats in the past, and one of the hats you've also had is to be part of, or the chair of the Board of Trustees for Muslim Aid. Muslim Aid has been operating in Sri Lanka over the last 10 years, very active. One of the prominent Muslim charities in the world. What do you think the value of an organization like Muslim Aid brings in terms of its contribution to the narrative and development, peace, humanitarian work, and by extension then to wider discussions about the roles of Muslims in some of these key areas of engagement?
Yeah, I think as an international NGO, Muslim Aid is basically a basic a platform, an opportunity to express a fundamental value of our faith. We need that kind of forum, that kind of activity to express our faith, and many thousands do through contributing to such organizations, through donations. When they see a suffering somewhere, they see a tragedy somewhere, they see a need somewhere, they share from their wealth, which is something that belongs to those people who need them. As Quran says, it is not a favor. You're giving to them what you hold as guardian for them. And this contribution is very important. But by being involved in such conflicts and places of inequality, disparity and suffering, and Muslimaid can do advocacy, can play an active role to address. It's not just a matter of throwing money into the problems. I think quite often charities like Muslimaid need to ask a more fundamental question, which is what is causing the problem, and see if they can actually play a more proactive role rather than always being reactive in addressing the root causes of poverty, of inequality, together with other NGOs as well as governments who have the responsibility to provide for their citizens. So it definitely has an important role, and it should not be seen by Muslims as an extracurricular activity of being Muslim, but a very fundamental duty of being Muslim. And that's the way I've always seen, and that this does provide that opportunity for us to make that contribution.
But we're also seeing now a lot of mushrooming of smaller charities, and much more players, if you want to put it, in the market. Do you see this as a positive sign of philanthropic nature of Muslims, or do you see this as perhaps diluting any effect and impact that charities can have because of the fact that people's attentions are spread?
Positive and negative. I think, of course, every time, every new infrastructure has a tax, has to spend so much money on the infrastructure. And by joining together, you could actually, merging together, you could actually save and have better results, and cost to benefit ratio can be improved. And I think that's the way perhaps charities should look at where they can join hands. Rather than just going and duplicating and competing. Competition is good, and the Quran still encourages competition in khairat, sabiqu bil khairat. Compete with each other in being good. And forcing everyone to give allegiance to one major or two major charities and say these 5 are the charities you must join. That's not going to happen. It's not required, it's not possible. and therefore I think it's free market. And if you and I see that something needs to be done, nobody else is doing, we should have the right to be able to mobilize resources and support and do that. But as we are working in the field, we should look at who else is doing what and where we can actually bring greater benefit by joining hands. So there should be a spirit of cooperation. As Quran says, "Ta'awanu al-birri wat-taqwa," cooperate in what is good and what is righteous, and seek opportunities to cooperate, to strengthen that voice in the sector.
I wanted to now bring you back to your current kind of focus or interest, which is looking at the Islamic Foundation, the work that it's been doing over the last decades and sort of moving forward. What do you think are the challenges such an organization, Islamic Foundation, which prides itself on research, publications? What do you see as some of the challenges moving forward? I think that for me, I feel that people don't read anymore, or the reading is it's not common. So how do you circumvent this kind of process?
Yes, Islamic Foundation, as many of your listeners or viewers would know, is a very old premier Islamic institution in Britain, established back in the early 1970s. It had been a major publisher on Islam, but lately, last 10, 12 years, it has also responded to the new challenges. Apart from just publishing books and carrying out some research work, translating some classical and other literature that we thought we had to bring to the English reader, the need to develop leadership, I think, is where we need to be focused. future leadership. So our Institute for Higher Education, Marf Institute of Higher Education Foundation helped establish, which is now an independent body, working together with, for example, the mainstream universities such as Newman University to have its courses validated, to have quality assured, to offer Islamic Studies program where the new graduates of traditional seminaries, Darul Uloom, can be open to and exposed to critical thinking, reasoning and studying to understand the faith in the context rather than just taking a curriculum which, being the product of a curriculum which was devised for a different time and place and just from articulating the same formulations, but developing formulations that we need to be able to integrate in Europe and to be able to live as Muslims in Europe and to be able to bring the blessing of Islam in Europe. So this is the challenge, producing that kind of leadership. So I'm very pleased that many of the graduates of these seminaries have now the opportunity to actually acquire mainstream degrees and qualifications in higher education and get involved in research, in playing more leadership roles in mosques and Islamic organizations. So I think that is where we are now focusing ourselves. And we hope we can also be an institution, and we have been active in interfaith relations, in addressing the issue of conflict between Islam and modernity and basically finding and discovering what it means to be Muslim in a modern world. We don't want to be, I'm not talking about a modern Islam or a changing Islam as it were, but Islam has within it the capacity to guide us in all times, today or tomorrow and next century and beyond till the day of judgment as we believe. So, but it's the challenge for us to find within that Islam what are the key priorities for us today.
And I think that as you said, that is a challenge, because I think even in Sri Lanka now, those debates are starting, at least within the younger generation, starting to kind of become more louder. Like what is our value addition to this context, or what is the value addition that Islam can bring? And I think that there's more and more of these debates need to happen.
Yes, indeed. We need scholars of our time with experiences of our time, but with in-depth understanding of the sources and being loyal to the faith to come forth. But all of that requires institutions to provide the opportunity for people to sharpen those faculties and understanding and come to dialogue and discussion. I also think that the technology that we have at our disposal today of connecting people around the world and the way the world is shrinking, I think it's important that we need to also, as Islamic Foundation, provide for that international coordination. It's something I'll be exploring and talking to with people in Sri Lanka, institutions, how the people and institutions in Sri Lanka can also have their own experiences, unique experiences, I would say, and also a minority context, that we need to bring all of these key institutions and organizations, individuals, to meet more often, to address those issues that you're talking about, and then share the good practice and good ideas.
Of the many hats that you have worn in the past and continue to wear, what has been the most challenging, and what is the one that gives you the most satisfaction? Like you feel, okay, this is something where you feel, okay, I've managed. I feel that there's something that I've made a small contribution to that.
That's a difficult question. Yeah, actually, I think when I meet someone who says, he or she was able to do something, or become more active and create something or do something new and different because of something I've done or listening to me or some ideas, that's always the most satisfying. Because at the end, I think it's a matter of creating human will and desire, and finding them the routes through which they can actually achieve their potential. So that's why I've always been fascinated by the issue of personal development, management in organizations, because you often see the same 24 hours, somebody achieves so much more and somebody so much less. And the one who achieves less says, look, I've been so busy and I had no time, and one who achieves so much more seems to be a bit more relaxed, can still do so much more. So there's huge potential within human beings. I think as organizations, we have to value human life, each and every human being you see a potential in that person. That person in his own right is a star, can be a star. So all the projects from my young Muslim days when, and I've seen many of these young Muslims who perhaps would not have been active members of Muslim community or society, create projects, activities, all kind, from being big conferences and programs to become writers and to create channels or be involved in media or politics. It's just good to see that, that we can activate people. And to me, everyone has a role to play, and organizations should provide that. So yes, from that point of view, I think most satisfying would be any work that engages new people. When you meet new people, engage new people, you feel encouraged and refreshed.
Thank you very much, Brother Farooq, for coming, and we hope you will grace us again with your presence. We look forward to seeing you in another episode of Wide Ranging Issues produced by Knowledge Box very soon, inshallah.
Knowledge Box, the value-based media network.